In 452 AD, a massive cavalry force breached the Alps and poured into northern Italy. This was the army of Attila the Hun. To the Romans, this invasion felt like a divine punishment. They called Attila the Scourge of God, a terrifying force of nature that sacked cities from Milan to Aquileia, advancing with seemingly unstoppable momentum. Yet, the very next year, the nightmare ended without a battlefield climax. On the night of his wedding, Attila drank heavily, suffered a hemorrhage, and quietly choked to death on his own blood in his bedchamber. Without his leadership, Attila's sons immediately fractured the empire in a bitter civil war. Subject tribes rebelled, the confederation shattered, and by the year 469, the Huns vanished from the historical record entirely. The Roman Empire, battered as it was, outlived them. The most terrifying military superpower of the ancient world evaporated almost overnight, leaving a massive power vacuum in its wake. A century later, that vacuum in the fertile plains of the Pannonian Basin, modern-day Hungary, would be filled again. A new nomadic group, known as the Avars, swept into the region. They mirrored the Huns closely, building a vast empire that stretched from Austria to the Pontic steppe, and imposing their will on the surrounding settled civilizations. Eventually, they followed the exact same trajectory. After 2 centuries of dominance, the Avar Khaganate spectacularly collapsed, and the people vanished from the historical map. These rapid disappearances make steppe nomads look like phantoms. To figure out where these superpowers actually went, we have to look at the mechanics of how they were built in the first place. Historians once relied entirely on Roman or Byzantine chronicles, which painted these groups as unified racial hordes. Today, researchers are extracting DNA from ancient grave sites to read the biological history of the Avar elite. This genetic mapping reveals a precise starting point. The Avar ruling class originated thousands of miles away in ancient Northeast Asia, fleeing the fall of their own Ruran Khaganate and racing west across the steppe. As they moved, this core group absorbed displaced Iranian nomads, Dramatic tribes, and Slavic farmers, rolling them all into a massive, highly mobile coalition. This process is known as ethnogenesis. The Avar identity was a fresh political creation, forged as refugees and warriors banded together under one banner for mutual survival. A nomadic empire was a powerful political machine, fueled entirely by forward momentum and the promise of security. The engine driving that momentum was a devastating military advantage. Armed with powerful composite bows and fighting entirely from horseback, these confederations easily outmaneuvered the heavy infantry of settled civilizations. They weaponized this mobility to extort their neighbors. At that peak, the Avars forced the Byzantine Empire to pay thousands of pounds of solid gold every single year as protection money, just to keep the riders away. That continuous flow of plunder was the only glue holding the diverse Avar confederation together. A charismatic central leader, the Khagan, would distribute the wealth to regional chieftains to buy their continued allegiance. They lacked rigid bureaucracies or permanent tax systems. If the raids stopped and the gold dried up, the alliances would immediately splinter, putting the entire empire at constant risk of sudden death. By the late 8th century, the Avar war machine finally stalled. Pushed back by emerging European powers and cut off from Byzantine gold, the ruling class turned on itself in brutal internal power struggles. The fatal external blow came from the west. Between 791 and 796, Frankish armies led by Charlemagne swept into the Pannonian Basin, capturing the Avar capital and seizing their accumulated treasure. Without wealth to distribute or military power to project, the Khaganate fractured. Just like the Huns 3 centuries earlier, the name Avar disappeared from the chronicles within a single generation. Modern historians recognize that Avar was a political title. When the institution failed, there was no longer any economic or military benefit to holding that title, so the population dropped the label. The people themselves did not go extinct. The former horse lords and their subjects settled down and peacefully assimilated into the surrounding European farming communities. The legendary scourges of the steppe were highly effective, incredibly volatile political systems. When the institutions finally went bankrupt, their members simply blended into the landscape, becoming the ancestors of modern Europe.